gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you at the event of Ukrainian Economical Strategy Center. So this is the final meeting for us this year. This is the final meeting for us in our every month meeting that we've had, that one that we've used to be presenting the specialized analytical documents, the one that we have been preparing together with the German economic team, together with our German colleagues, and we have been conducting these events together. So today's presentations and today's discussion that we're going to have is being held with the participation of the key actors in developing the social and economical policies in Ukraine. And today we have a special final event because we're going to be using this platform and this event to sum up year 2022. We know that it has been an outstanding year, and we're trying to find the right way to describe it. We wanted to we really would like to say that this is the first year of the full-scale war. We really would like to see this year, just a year of war. We wanted to see 2023 without the war, or at least to make the wars take the very small part of the year 2023. We're going to be talking about it as well, but mostly we're going to be talking about the results of Ukraine in 2022. So we are working together with the German economic team. We're always really helpful. We're really grateful for the every month's support from our partners from the Ukrainian business online publication Ekonomiczna Pravda. And once again, I wanted to remind you that we have the simultaneous interpretation from English to Ukrainian and vice versa. So please make sure that you will choose the right language channel. Now, also about an important moment about the questions that we would like to discuss today. If you will take a look at our agenda, then we're going to have a brief introduction by Robert Kirchner, who is the deputy head of the German economic team. Then we will definitely have our presentation with the outlook of all of the year 2022, when we're going to be have a separate presentation from the colleagues that spend the time on the specific topics. And then we will not going to have a discussion as we usually have, but we will have three separate presentations by the Minister of Finance of Ukraine, by the head of National Bank of Ukraine, and the deputy head of Deputy Minister of Economy and the trade representative of Ukraine. We're not going to be having a discussion between those three outstanding guests, respectable, distinguished guests, politicians and state officers, but you will definitely have an opportunity to ask the questions to their presentations, and if you have any questions to them, you will have the opportunity to ask the questions while we are going to be presenting our analysis of the results of year 2022. So I would like to say that you will have the next 20 minutes so to use the Q&A part of our Zoom meetings, and I will, as moderator, will be following the questions that you'll say, and our panelists will also be following your questions. And I'm going to be then targeting those questions to Serhiy Marchenko, the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine, Taras Kachka, the Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine, and Andrii, the head of National Bank. So we'll start. So I would like to thank Robert for, first of all, personally to you for the support that you have granted. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Flip. I hope everyone can hear me. Good afternoon from Berlin, and a very warm welcome to all participants of today's online event, How Ukraine's Economy Survived Through 2022. It is a really great pleasure for the German economic team to continue our long-standing cooperation with the Center for Economic Strategy in Kiev in supporting and co-hosting this event today together. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to the high-level panel discussion later on between Finance Minister Marchenko and EU Governor Pyshny and Deputy Minister of Economy Kachka about their respective insights. I think this impressive lineup shows how quickly the CES Economic Monthly has established itself as a prime source of information on the Ukrainian economy. At the end of the year, there was always time for reflection, and today's discussion will reflect on Ukraine's economy during times of war. As in many other areas, I believe it is a story of brave resilience in light of extreme challenges caused by this terrible war and terror unleashed by Russia. I think all partners and friends of Ukraine from across the world admire Ukraine and its people for its bravery, shown over the last 10 months. At the same time, this should remind us in the West to do more and to step up support for Ukraine in its just fight for its national survival on all necessary levels for as long as it takes. Thank you. I will now give the word back to Gleb, who will moderate the discussion. Gleb, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. So we are now going to start with a presentation from my colleagues that have been preparing the outlook of Ukrainian economy throughout year 2022. I just wanted to say that and we're going to have this report published after our today's discussion, and in English we're going to be publishing it in the websites in the few days to come. So I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues, and the first person who's going to be presenting, that would be Dmytro Hodunov, the senior economist of our center. Please. Yes, hello dear colleagues, can you hear me well? Yes, okay, Gleb, can I then, if it's because we have a lot of speakers and a lot of slides, so maybe we can switch to the content slides already. Yes, I would just to remind in a couple of words, so what is the military situation is right now. Also, on the very first day in February, Ukraine was coping with our own strengths, and will given us the time to wait for the military support of the West and to be the defensive and then go into the counter attacks, and that's given us the opportunity to free the north regions in the springtime, Kiev, Chernihiv, and then going to Sumy and Kharkiv region, and then coming to liberating the Ukrainian south. So as of now, right now we have liberated almost half of those areas that has been occupied since the 24th of February. Gleb, can I ask for the next slide, please? And as you know, also, together with the Kyiv School of Economy, we have been working on trying to calculate the costs of the war, and we have already seen that it's almost $740 billion. Those are direct losses, the physical equities that have been lost, and we had almost $136 billion. That was the damages. Then the losses of the imports or in income even was evaluated even higher on level $165 billion, and the overall need in the restoration, the one that we are also calculating not only the recoveries, and we'll always wanted to recover buildings not as they were, but trying to reconstruct it is together, taking into consideration the energy efficiency and being ecologically friendly. So for them to have shelters as well, for example, considering all of those factors, the need for the recovery is around $242 billion. Unfortunately, those numbers are approximate. They're not final because some of those indicators, they have been evaluated just approximately or through the modeling, because we do not have the full access to the temporarily occupied territories, and so it isn't impossible for us to understand what the real level of the damages is. So unfortunately, all of those figures, there are just a minimum evaluation. The next slide, please. In the same time, even throughout all of those damages, throughout the shock that we have been going through, and the businesses have started to recover from the shock, as for example, how we have seen in the overall review, the overall surveys by the European Business Associations and American Chambers of Commerce in Ukraine, we have seen that there was the restoration of the businesses, at least partly that has happened. In the summer, the National Bank of Ukraine, they have restarted their survey on the business optimisms among the businessmen, and up till September, the indicators have grown. The one thing that has stopped that was actually the shellings of the energy infrastructure, but we will talk about that slightly later. So, the 50% of confidence, it means that the number of the confident people, the optimists, are just the same as the pessimists. So you can see that we have even got to this point, to this level in some of the sectors at some point of time. All of that has caused the hardest downfall of the GDP in 1 year that we have had throughout the history of Ukraine. So there's different evaluations right now, but we have seen the downfall of at least 1/3 of Ukrainian GDP. We can compare this with the previous crisis. So we can see we can forget about the first one because that was basically the full restoration of the economy after the USSR fall, and there's a questions about the statistics quality up till that. So I think that this is not a good comparison, but still not the financial crisis, not the very beginning of this war in 2014 that everyone has been afraid of, not the COVID-19 that was really scary, hasn't impacted Ukrainian economy that harsh. So right now we are just having the 35% of the downfall. The forecasts for the next year in the downfall of the GDP are very different right now. So some people are expecting to see some of the growth of the GDP, and some people are expecting to see that downfall even deeper. Just a couple of words about the biggest economy sectors. Speaking about the metal industry, that is one of our biggest downfall of the economy. That was one of the biggest drivers of Ukrainian economy before the invasion. So right now it has been really influenced. Azovstal and the metal industrial factory after Ilyich, so they have been the biggest enterprises that have been damaged and they have been destroyed. Moreover, the Avdiivka coal plant, they have also been shelled, and in September there was the shelling of the ArcelorMittal Kryvyi Rih that has also been damaged. There are basically the flows that have been really stronger, so we have a lot of loss of the assets. The metallurgy is commodity, so ore and the metal products that has been continued to be exported and has been exported by the sea, and the sea wasn't available for us for the longest period of time. So there was once again the changes of the supply chain. So here we have seen this production falling by very, very significant figures. And you can see those in these photos will understand that this is more to the prices level as well. But you can see that the last year, but you can see that there is have been overstood the level to the exports of the ore and metals, but you can see that we had a very high downfall, that one that very especially comparable to the level of 2021. The energy infrastructure, so basically everyone, we know that Russia is concentrated on damaging the electricity infrastructure in Ukraine. So basically, Russia, that has been called the biggest oil station of Europe, they have now been actually concentrating on destroying the infrastructure. So right now we're not importing the oil from Russia or Belarus, and our biggest oil processing plant has been destroyed as well. And we had some crisis at the beginning of the year for fueling the cars. This is something that has influenced the logistics very strongly. But fortunately, we were able to manage this crisis because we have gone through this the different place of supply. We have now retargeted to the different supply channels and to different logistical channels. But as far as it is a very disintegrated system, we managed to do that, and it works well. And so basically right now it might not be destroyed if we're speaking about the oil supply. So even right now when we need an additional supply of oil and fuel due to the usage of the fuel generators, the systems cope with that. The only thing that it's caused it was basically by increasing the prices, the retail prices. The retail prices have grown by 1/3 at the smallest estimates. Then we had the wave of shelling against the electricity infrastructure of Ukraine. We've had the situation of the occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and we have had the hits on the other generating objects of the systems. I would like to say that all of the thermal power plants and hydrothermal power plants have been shelled, plus all of our warehouses and most of the equipment of the energy sector has been damaged. So the people in our energy sector sector. They are the real heroes, the true heroes. They're trying to restore all of the system as fast as possible. They're learning how to work under these systems and under these conditions, and our Western partners are helping us out with money and with the system. But the situation is really hard still because the hits are being continued. We know that the Russians have the rockets at least for the next 2 or 3 hits of all of those forces that have of the same force that we have seen in the recent times. The agriculture has had less losses, less direct losses, because basically the agricultural sector of Ukraine is being geographically decentralized in Ukraine. So basically that's really hard to damage it fully, but the mine pollution of the Arab land is the biggest problem, especially in those territories close to the Russian border. That is, will take a decade at least, or even maybe even more years to just demine these territories. But at least we were able to restore the exports. So together with Turkey and other international partners, we managed to reopen our ports, not all of the ports, but just the big ones at this very moment. But still, we've had this agreement for 120 days, and we were able to continue it for 100 days more. So right now it feels better. Yes, that's bad, but even before we had this opportunity, that was definitely worse. But right now, the traders, logistics, they've known how to use the different resources to trade grain, to use the railroads, to use the cargo transport, or using rivers as well. Even in October, the exports has almost reached the levels of the October 2021. That's all from my part. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Dmytro. And I will pass the floor to Maxim Simotyuk, one of our economists. Please, Max. Yes, thank you, Gleb. So the full invasion and full war has caused a big impact of inflation in Ukraine, and we can see that our all inflation was on the level of 26%, and by the end of the year it might even will grow up to 30% of inflation. But for Ukraine in a wartime, it is a very moderate level of inflation. Most of the countries of Europe, they feel the Russian aggression impact, that has additional impact for their inflation as well. A very bad situation is for Moldova, where the inflation in Moldova is even higher than in Ukraine. On the very first day of the full-scale invasion, the National Bank of Ukraine have stated the official rate of exchange rate at level of 29.25 Ukrainian hryvnias, and there were some limitations on the cash provision. That has something that given us the opportunity to have no panic in the banking sector. There has been some differences between the markets and the national banks rates, and the national banks has got it to the level of 36.6 Ukrainian hryvnias to $1. Right now, there is the gap that between the official rate and the market remains, and national banks are now going to intervention with the real market. Next slide, please. The National Bank has not increased the yield of, they only made it in June because they had some doubts about the security situation. The increase of the rate has impacted the Ministry of Finance because they needed to change the overall rates at on the military military assets that have been issued. So right now they have in the military bonds. Now they have the level of income at level 18.5. The increase of the yield has been on the level of 12%, and because due to the need, the General Bank are not going to be increasing their incomes due to the need of additional risk assessment and crediting. And the banks have shown their resilience, and the banking systems have shown their resilience since the very beginning of the war. The mass majority of banks that are operating, they have high liquidity, and due to the help of the national banks, but still the lending remains depressed. And to some moment there has been the corporate lending that has been developed with the help of the additional lending from the state-owned bank that was boosted by 579 program. The deposits is growing steady, even though there is a very lower level of income. The UAH deposits are showing the good growth with the help of the military's man salaries that has been paid on the credit cards. And after the National Bank has provided the short-term deposits in July, the foreign currency deposits have started also to show some growth. So basically the banking sectors, they're holding on, but basically bankings are only being used as a payment intermediaries. They have very limited lending, the excess liquidity is held on the NDB certificate, and other operations are mostly ineffective. Thank you. Thank you, Maxim. And once again, dear participants of our today's event, I wanted to mention once again that the questions to the head of the National Bank, the Minister of Finance, and the Deputy Minister of Economy can be set out in the Q&A function on the lower panel of your Zoom. And then I will pass those questions after the specific presentation. So right now you still have time for the next 3 presentations from the team of our center. You will have the opportunity to write down the questions that you have. Please use this opportunity if you had the questions that you wanted to ask specifically to the heads of our key financial and economical institutions of Ukraine. Please do that. So the next presentation is going to be by Yuri Haidai, our senior economist on the budget sector. I just wanted to once again say why we have the English on the screen. So we wanted to have this event and those notes. We have been doing that as an understanding, the opportunity to give the deeper understanding of what is going on in Ukraine for both international and our domestic audience. So that is why we're trying to do that, to make it the easiest way to comprehend the information. So that is why we've used the English slides as well. And we understand that our international partners are important for us as allies during the war, and we wanted to have the Ukrainian voiceover for the Ukrainian audience to be able to understand that as well. Thank you, Gleb. So now speaking about the budget sector. So the most important budget tax, the VIT, has fallen, and that has been due to the economical shock that has been caused by the start of the invasion, due to the downfall of the consumption and the logistics problems that have been there. And then you can see that the price that the VIT income has been restored, and it has been mostly compensated due to the one-time incomes, for example, that redistribution of the income of the companies, of the state-owned companies, the redistribution of the income of the National Bank, using the advances of the income payments, and what have been done by some responsible businesses. The situation has got better from the beginning of July, when we've had this VAT system fully working, and you can see this leap down there, and you can see that starting from August we have had normalized the situation with both domestic and the foreign VATs. Some of the fluctuations, they have been caused by the differences in the restitution of the VAT that has sometimes been the competitors with the needs of financial support to the army right now, and it's not clear. We understand that right now the main priority is for the defense and security sector, but not for the returns on the VAT. But overall, this income has been quite sustainable throughout the last 4 months. And if you will take a look at the graph on the right, where you can see the lines showing the cumulative income from the start of the year, of what kind of taxes have been provided. So those are the taxes for the services and goods in domestic use. So you can see that if we're going to be all with inflation correlated, then you can see that has been stabilization on the very same level. Only in November we have seen some of the effects coming on, because that has been the problem with the blackouts and outcuts of electricity, because all of the groups that might have impacted that, we have seen a slow downfall, and the slow downfall of all of the results of all of the economy sectors. Now, a little bit of details about the VAT situation, because the VAT is a very critically important tax right now for our budget. We now see the bigger attention and a harsher administration of this tax from the side of the states. And we can see that through the multiple public responses of the businesses, and we can see that in the qualitative way as well. And we can see that in the year 2022, the connections between the VAT that has been paid back and the growth of the VAT, it's a kind of an indirect indicator, but it's good for the comparison, is got to the level of 28%, so 0.28%, so which is much higher than all of the historical previous results in the different months of the different years as well. And we understand that the income of the domestic VAT in year 2022 for the first 11 months were at least 5% lower than in 2021. We have the great difference in the factual amounts of the VAT that has to be restituted. Some of the part of this money, we do hope that there has been the lack of violations in the VAT systems, but some of the part of that is dedicated due to the, once again, flow cash of the integral and compliant money that has not been restituted as a VAT yet. And we've also have analyzed with the mid-year VAT refund time, and starting from the application and the time that the refund has been completed, we know that this time has now grown up to 60 days. So we have this short-term crediting tool with the VAT refund. The next slide, please. And the overall costs and expenses, so we can see in 2022 that has been an increase of the taxes on the security and defense, and there have been hovering over the social expenses or any kind of expenses or taxes overall. We have seen that the overall spending for the defense was 65% of all of the budget's expense in the 2 years. So the next years we actually expect in the same situation, and according to the budget that has already been approved, we know that the defense expenses are going to be more than a half of all of the expenses. Thus, under those circumstances, that's very important to have the good financial, good sources for the budgets. We have already received $28 billion from our partners that has been both the granting and lending. And on the first slide, the one thing that I've forgotten to comment, I wanted to say that October and November, there was the first 2 months when we did not had the granting support, only $11 million in November, from what I remember overall. So right now, I think that closer to the year, we're going to have the share of the credits in this financial support is now significantly grown. And everything that we were not able to have from our international partners, we have through our bonds, we needed to call right now to close with our monetary measures. So right now we're talking about the equivalent of $12 billion, what we're doing with the monetary measures. It's one of the most important moments that for our resilience in the budget sector, the one that we will be tracking next year on with the additional attention of how sustainable we're going to have the financial support and financial aid with the help of our allies, because that will be definitely one of the measures that is going to be working, because due to this, the inflation, our other policies will depend on that as well. Our fiscal policy right now is very stimulating because the state costs there are much higher than the one that we receive from the economy, and this is a situation that is going to be preserved for the next year on as well. So we need to have at least monetary financial measures as possible. Thank you. That's all from my side. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Yuri. The next block was about the human capital, and I would like to invite Anna Sakhno. She has been working with the Center of Economy Strategy through a longer period of time as a human capital economist, and right now she is a part of the PhD program in the Groningen University. She's now being an intern in the European Central Bank, and she's working with us on the separate project still. And we wanted to ask her to evaluate the human capital situation during wartime. Yes, thank you very much, Hip. I hope that you can hear me well. Okay, great. So I will tell you quickly about what was happening with the human capital in Ukraine. So in Ukraine, we had a lot of external migration. 7.8 million of Ukrainians have been forced to leave, and there's mostly staying in European countries. There's mostly women and children. In Poland, for example, there's 90% of all of the migrants. Just for you to understand the scale, in the last migration crisis in 2015, there was 2.5 migrants from Africa and the Middle East countries. They have found their shelter in the European Union countries, and right now, in the first 3 weeks of the war, almost 3 million of Ukrainians have moved to Europe, have left for Europe. And then, you remember, in 2015, the migration crisis was called the biggest migration crisis since the World War II, just for you to compare the figures. Another figure that I wanted to share with you is about the Ukrainian children. We had the information that as of March of 2022, 2,250,000 Ukrainian children have been integrated to the European Union educational establishments. And just for you to understand the context, as of September 2022, in Ukrainian schools, we had 5.4 million children in kindergartens and schools. So basically, you can see that 43% of Ukrainian children are now being located outside of Ukrainian educational establishments right now. The next slide, please. I will also give you a quick outlook of our internal migration. 6.5 million Ukrainians that are being the IDPs right of now. Half of them have received the IDP's official status, and this is the figure that hasn't changed since September. And as evaluated by the international migration organizations, up to 5 million of Ukraine might have gone back home from other regions of Ukraine or from abroad. And important to admit that the situations among the IDP is harder than the economic situations among other Ukrainians, but it's getting better. In July, 30% of the IDPs have had jobs and had some income. So right now there is an indicator of 40%, but it's still lower than average in Ukraine. And you can see it's been evaluated by the survey that there are 60% of people who have been internally displaced and who have the job now. The next slide, please. And I tried to get all of the figures with the same graph, just for you to understand the scale of the humanitarian crisis that the Russian aggression have caused. And you can see that the half of population of Ukraine in some measure has been impacted, has been participating in the effective migration processes. And we're speaking about the forced displacement of Ukrainians that have been forcibly displaced to Russian Federations and Belarus, which is almost 2 million of Ukrainians. I'm going to tell you about the labor market overall, what is happening. So the evaluations of the employment and unemployment level are different because it's really hard to evaluate it right now. At least it's really hard to evaluate the overall scale of it. I'm going to tell you a little bit how the situation has changed, at least according to the sociological surveys. Most of Ukrainians have jobs, so this hasn't changed. The share of the people hasn't changed. The people who have jobs but are not able to work right now, this share has been quite high from the very beginning of the war, at the beginning of the invasion, but right now it's getting lower, so it means that most of the people are getting back to the previous jobs they've had. And on the next slide, the one thing that I wanted to show you, those are the two graphs. The average income of Ukrainians has also decreased. The state agency of statistics, they are not publishing the data on the average salaries because they don't have enough information, but the pension fund of Ukraine, they're publishing the data on the average salary that has been the part of the insurance payments. And you can see based on this dynamic that they're really highly correlated with one another. So you can see the average salary with what the state statistics agency has said as the average salaries. And you can see that there is almost 20% of decrease of the real salaries due to this high inflation that has been on the level of 26% annually. The nominal salaries in this indicators have also decreased by 5%. And just recent research of the Sands Bank that used to be the Alpha Bank, they've used their own data. They have shown that 11% is the level of the decrease of the real salaries of Ukraine, and mostly the decrease in the private sector, not that much in the state. The labor market is supporting the employers, even in the IT sector, so the numbers of vacancies is lower than the number of the candidates that are wanting to apply for this vacancy. So you can see how in year 2020 there was impacted by the corona crisis, in year 2021 that was the little bit of restoration after the coronavirus crisis, and then the war. And you can see how the number of the vacancies have decreased in 2020, how they have been actively restored in year 2021, when the people who have been actively hired and the potential candidates, they wanted to think whether they would like to take the offer or not. The year 2022 is about the downfall. People are not hiring people that actively as they used to do even during the quarantine times. But the numbers of candidates is increasing and is quite high still. The very same situation, and I'm giving you the data on the Work UA portal. This is the situation for all of the sectors, not just the IT. This is the situation that we have already seen, even in the IT market, that wanted we used to believe that very resilient. That's all. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Anna. And the final part that we have in our presentation, I would like to pass that to Flor Maria Repko, the deputy head of our Center for Economic Research. She has been our foreign minister, our Minister of Foreign Affairs this year. She has been working with our international partners, speaking on behalf of the support of Ukrainian economy and financial policy of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Liv. You know, I don't like calling anything a front line, except for the real front line, because there are the really people who are right now protecting us in the front line in the other regions of Ukraine. Those are the real heroes and the real warriors of the front. Okay, so what have you heard already? What Ukraine has been going through was really hard, and without the support of our partners, without the support of the countries that providing us military, financial, economical support, we would have been in the worst situation for sure. But in my point of view, Ukraine has been working diplomatically very powerfully with international partners. If we will just say that the policy is the art of possibility, then Ukraine, I do believe, has made three things that were thought to be impossible. First of all, the wars and starting the supply of the arms and weapons. There has been thought that Ukraine will not stand against Russia for a couple of weeks even, and there has been a lot of public notions that no one is going to be given Ukrainian arms and not going to be given the javelins or in love, because it's going to be just the small people's resistance, and no one was even talking about giving the HIMARS or any other type of weapons. So, but we have seen that the military successes of Ukrainian army on fighting against the Russian invasion and by being very good in protecting our own land has helped us to, first of all, overturn the events on the front line and to have the more of the Western support. In July, and you can see, according to the searches needs, you can see that the story about the HIMARS has become very popular, and right now we're talking about the providing of the arms and rocket bombs, and providing the long-distance arms is now being even addressed. Even though half a year ago, Europe and the US, they would never have thought about giving Ukrainian any kind of serious weapons. So Ukraine has broadened this horizon of impossible, and we did it on our behalf, we did it for our benefit during this war. So what we need to do right now is to once again talk to our partners and just to assure them that Ukraine should have and need to have the long-distance rockets, and we need to have a more other weapons as well and more equipment. We have to also remember about the sanctions, because it felt like impossible to have any sanctions against Russia, but right now we have the acknowledgement of Russia as a country that supports terrorism and finances terrorism, and I do hope that the next further development of the situation would have Russia as a part of the blacklist at the FATF. The next slide, please. Another impossible made possible was the financial support that has been provided to Ukraine. We would never expect that our international partners would help us to cover the financial losses of Ukraine. And right now we can see that almost a half of Ukrainian budget has been supported by lending and grants that made by our international partners, and we're really, really grateful to that. It wasn't the situation from the very beginning, from the first months, and you can see April, May, you can see that we didn't have the regular sources of costs of money, and our national bank has used monetary methods for that has negatively impacted the inflation. But then the whole world has seen that Ukrainians are working on and doing everything to keep its banking system alive, and we have had a lot of functions continued in the state. And due to this level of resilience, the Western partners, they've started started to provide a regular financial support so that Ukraine would be able to hold on through this military and war period. So right now there is the need of the military support and aid for the next years to come. It has to be forecastable, it has to be solid, so that we would also will not use our resilience as well. And the most important thing about that also is to switch from discussions to switch to very specific steps in making Russia pay for everything that is Russian doing right now against Ukraine and against Ukrainian people, is to have a clearer understanding that the Russian assets are not going to be just frozen, but will be arrested for sure, that then will be used for the support and the recovery of Ukraine. And then the third impossible made possible by Ukraine. Ukraine is now ascending as a candidate country for the European Union. That is something that is really important for all of my friends and colleagues. This is something that given us the outlook of the potentially brighter future after the war. Together with Ukraine, Moldova has become a candidate, and right now they already have the access to this four freedoms that are the part of the European Union: the freedom of movement, the movement of services and goods. On the people's movement, with the help of our friends and with the help of our partnering countries and allies, Ukrainian migrants, Ukrainian refugees, they can feel comfortable in European countries, they can work there, they can travel there, they can educate their kids and use the schools and kindergartens there as well. Speaking about the movement of goods and services, it has been partially provided by the temporary approval for Ukraine to move our goods without the fees, without the customs payments, and we are now free out of those customs payments. Maybe we can prolong that for a longer period of time. Ukraine has become the part of the NCOE, the energy networks, the European energy network, and we're hopeful that we will be a part of the transportation network of Europe as well. We need to continue to work on our European integration so that the European future of Ukraine after the war would have been real. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. Yes, I think that this is the end of our presentation. And right now we will pass the floor to Serhiy Marchenko, the Minister of Finance of Ukraine. Thank you very much for joining us, Serhiy. Sorry for the delay. We were really optimistic about the length of our presentation, but we all usually, as usual, we made more analysis than we planned. So, Serhiy, the most important question that we have towards you as the Minister of the Finance, how did you manage in this really harsh time? How did you manage to go with the country without the problems with payment with the state budget, when the state was able to fulfill its key obligations to finance the war, and whether you believe it will be able to keep up with that for the next year to come? Yes, thank you, Lip. Thank you, dear Center of Economical Research team. That's a very high quality report. I just wanted to thank you for your job, first of all, because you are the expert team that has been working on facts, and then you're using the facts, making your own conclusions and making your own offers. That is very, very important. Under the conditions of the misinformations, when we have a lot of contacts and offers, then I'm really eager to watch your presentations. And I know that I didn't spend this time in vain. It was really interesting for me to know that. And I do believe that those approaches that you're using, I wanted to provide the answers to your questions. Whether we will be able to hold on? Well, I think that most of the people try to do the same as I do. In March and in March and in February, March, we didn't. In March and April, we were not able to understand how long this war will take, and we didn't know how long it might take. We were talking about only the 3 months of support. So right now we have had the 10 months of support already. We're talking about the support that has been provided by our partners already. But in the same time, and the very same verified number of our 5 billion of our monthly needs has been there in March and April, and it's just the same even now. And this amount of money that you have shown on the slides, that one that we received with the help, with the granting support of our partners. So right now we've had 28 billion. So this is something that doesn't cover our 10 months need. That should have been potentially been 50 billion for us to be able to cover all of our needs. 28 is what we received, and 12 what was the net monetary financing of the National Bank of Ukraine, and I'm really grateful that we have had this need, because yes, we know that there are risks, there are we know that we will be trying to limit the monetary financial support. We will try to do that as less as possible. We will try to get it up to the level of 0. This is our aim, together with the National Bank of Ukraine, and I'm really grateful to the head of the National Bank of Ukraine. We have a joint vision on the same position. We had the same position on that. Speaking on the I'm recalling year 2021, I'm recalling year 2020, I'm recalling the first years when I have been the Deputy Finance Minister. I wanted to say that we're really grateful for our partners that we were able to lend up to $1.5 billion a year. So that was an important moment that we were using the bonds issuing. We have had the lendings and loans from the World Bank. So we had the concession financial support. So we were able to do that up to $2 billion. And that's something that would cover all of the needs. Right now, we're talking about 28 billion. And this is the amount of money that has been accumulated with our joint efforts. And I do believe that this is a tremendous work, not only of the employees of the National Bank or the Ministry of the Finance, but this is the tremendous work that has been done by all of our partners, by all of the executives of Ukraine, all of the high officers in Ukraine. And it's incredible that we were able to provide that. We have the ambitious goal for the next year, 38 billion. We are now learning how to do our job properly. We're not thinking that our war is going to end tomorrow. So yes, it's easier for us to think that the war is going to end at some point of time. That doesn't depend on you, and you have to plan your work. So we have built this budget understanding that we need to accumulate $38 billion, and we are now talking to our partners on finding the ways to finance this amount of money. You know that the European Commission has finalized already, which basically supported us with the 18 billion euro we will receive from the side of the European Commission. On the side of the US, we're talking about 9.9 billion for the next 9 months of Ukrainian budget, which is very important for us as well. So we are now launching the monitoring program together with the IMF, and we do hoping that we're going to have a full program afterwards of the financial support. And additionally, we're hoping to attract the lending from the World Bank and from additional J7 countries financial support from Canada, from Japan, from the UK, first of all, will help us not to say calmly, but let us say a little bit more comfortable than this year to plan for the next years to come as well. Thank you, Hrib. I'm ready to take all of the questions that you might have. Yes, thank you, Serhiy. Let us now pass the floor to Andrii. First of all, because I know that Andrii has a next meeting to come, and I know that we will need to get his time as well. Andrii, thank you very much for being able to join us. I know that you're on the business trip right now. I do want to give you the the floor. We know that the National Bank has done a lot at the early stages of the war, and there's something that has been outlined in our presentation as well. So do you think the challenges in front of the national banks have changed right now? Or is the banking system stronger now? Or was it actually weaker than it was in 2021? Good day, dear colleagues. You know, this is a very good report. It has given us the opportunity to evaluate the year that has passed, but it's important for us to know what the year awaits. I do believe that we're looking upwards for one of the most dramatic years for Ukrainian economy. I do believe that it will be one of the hardest, if not the hardest, winter that we might have thought of. So what is the banking system and what we're facing with 2023? Well, it's a very different banking system right now. We were able to stand through the year 2022 due to the idea, and you know that we've had quite full-scale reform of the corporate governance, and we tried to increase the financial resilience. We've built up a better financial models, and the year 2022 has shown that our banking system is able to continue working even under the harshest conditions. Year 2023 has to give us the opportunity of what is the additional capital needs and what is the quality of the assets that we have, and we need to concentrate our work on continuation of the work that we have. We know that there is the new challenges coming up, the one that we have never seen before, and the new challenges is the blackouts. And the National Bank right now is concentrating on the three main priorities. We are continuing the negotiations with the IMF, and we're hoping to have it a successful negotiations. In a couple of hours, it's going to be the Council of the IMF, and I do hope that we're going to have the final approval of providing the credit and monitoring systems. We have worked with the Ministry for the Financial very good, and we hope that we will have a very good results of these meetings. We hope that we will have a final results of that, but fingers crossed for that to happen. You know, right now I am in Washington, D.C., and I have been through the numbers of meetings right now, and I see the readiness of our international partners, to support Ukraine in the next year. So Serhiy has said on the horrendous amount of the state deficiency that we need to cover 38 billion, and National Bank welcomes the positions of the Ministry of the Finance, and we're going to be the powerful partners with the Ministry of the Finance and with the government for the next round of negotiations to have this additional rounds of support for our budget. So we were looking for non-emission sources of the financial support. We understand that the challenges of year 2022 are mostly connected to the highest emissions that we've had, almost 400 billion. So the situation has been due to the non-rhythmical and non-sustainable amount of the international support. And by the way, by the end of the year, that might be almost on the level of $31 billion overall. So we know that the next year we need to have our efforts joined. We need to have our domestic bonds markets and to use the potential of Ukrainian economy for support and finance to cover the deficiency of the budget. We need to go through this monitoring program and to open the doors for the big program further on, to collaborate with the IMF. Collaboration with IMF is one of the important factors for building the donorship coalition against in Ukraine, and having additional loans guarantees and additional money to use. Together with the same work that is going to be conducted by the National Bank, we're going to be doing the stress testing, assets evaluation, improving the financial resilience, providing the resilient work. I'm very optimistic that even due to the critical, dramatical situation connected to the challenge of the infrastructure, but you know, in 2 months of my work in the National Bank, so if we will consider the 9 shellings, so there has been 9 shellings of the critical infrastructure in the last 2 months, and in 2023 we do hope that we will be able to provide the sustainable work even due to those shellings. Together, I think we will be able to be resilient to everything. Thank you, Andrii, for your outlines. So we have a couple of minutes with you, from what I know. So I'm just going to ask those questions that has been directed specifically to you in the Q&A, and then additional question to Serhiy, and we will let you go for the next meeting to come. The question was, and the question that you might see that in the chat as well, or in the Q&A section. So do you expect to have an improvement of the lending for the corporate sectors for the bank? Was it resilient? Will you be able to have some development for the corporate sectors in that wartime? Well, this is one of the tasks that we wanted to settle. You would not only want to survive, but we want in 2023 to set out the basis for becoming stronger and then to get to the development. So, we're not even doubting our victory. On the lending, we have to understand that the year 2022 was not really good for the lending appetites of the banking systems, and it wasn't really good for increasing the desire of Ukrainian enterprises, or the capacities of Ukrainian enterprises, to have those lending resources. And like you have said in your report, so most of this, the financial support has been provided in the state program 579. So right now we're working together with the Ministry of the Finance and the Ministry of Economy so that the 579 program for the next year would be changed and calibrated, so that it will be calibrated due to those needs that we currently outline as priorities, so that it will be working for those directions that are now important for the state support, and so that our lenders would be building their relationship with banks based on the market needs and on the market's practices. I just wanted to say, and I do believe that you have outlined that in your report as well, that the inflation processes were tamed, and the level of inflation, we feel it, that it's growing, we can see that, but it's still even lower from the ones that have been forecasted in October. We can get by the end of the year with the overall indicators of 30% decrease in the index of the consumption prices, and it's lower than in Moldova, that has 34% of inflation and they don't have war. Even in Poland, that's 70.5% inflation now. So I think that the measures that have been taken by the National Bank, together with the external factors, are giving us optimism on that we will be able to control the certain indicators. And by the way, please note that we're going to publish our internal discussion with the Committee on the Monetary Policies. I think that it will be interesting for you as well to read it out, because you will be able to know that we are having this as an open discussion already, and we're discussing the possible options on of how to decrease the rates right now. But the position is just the same right now. So if we will have this certain level of uncertainty, and when we have the increase of the risks due to the constant challenge. So right now we are once again saying that we will going to take all of the measures that are needed to support the monetary policies of Ukraine and to preserve the indicators of inflation in the controlled range. But we see the next stage, we understand that the discussion has to be started right now, and we're planning it to have it for the year 2023. I do believe that based on the work that the National Bank is going to be conducting with our international partners, with all of our banks, then we will be able to understand what are the specific actions that are needed to be taken, because we need to create that demand for the lending, and we need to build up the capacities for Ukrainian enterprises to be applying for the lands, for additional credits. So surviving is not the main measure for us. We want to be developing next year. Thank you very much, Andrii. And we have another question to Serhiy for those 2 minutes that you still have with us in your schedule. Thank you very much, Andrii, and I hope that you will have all the successful meetings in Washington, D.C. Serhiy, the question that has been voiced out, the questions on the bonds. Everyone is recalling the experiences of the different wars when during the wars has been financially supported by the countries by using the lending, using the costs, using the money that have been in the domestic market. So what would be the ways that the Ministry of the Finances see to be more effective in working with this direction, working with bonds, and not trying to only think about the additional external financial support? Yes, thank you, Hlib. But I think that we should think about the situation divided into a couple of components. We believe that at the very beginning of war, in the first months of war, we had a very high demand, and we have been developing our bond in tools, domestic bond tools, very eagerly. We have invited lots of additional participants and actors to the bond market because that was one of the most important tools for us to provide the financial support for the budget efficiency. And this money should have been targeted and directed for the financial support of our army. Then the situation has slightly changed. Changed why? Because the risks and the inflation, the decisions of our banks and our adaptation to this level has got us to the understanding that right now we're talking about the way we're looking for activating the market, how to make it livelier, how can we provide the offer, the demand of the enough level for the Ministry of the Finance? How do we understand what the market rates is, and whether the Ministry of Finance has the ways of working with that, how we're going to be trying to find the balance between the demand and the offer that we build? Because in our point of view, in the recent times at least, we have an understanding of how that can be done, at least now. And I really wanted to thank the National Bank of Ukraine with their constructive support and position. We're trying to find the different available options so we would be able to restart the bond market, because right now we really wanted to see that, we really wanted to speak as, as the US had it, with 2.5% bonds, and those were the bonds that will be financing and supporting the whole military campaign despite inflation, despite everything else. So that was, the policy of the country at that period of time, and that there was enough demand, and there was enough demand that has been provided to finance the full military campaign of the US in the Second World War. Unfortunately, we are in a different situation, and unfortunately, we are forced to use the tools of the monetary transmission, and we're forced to use these tools with using the lending and taking out the cash from the market, and we're working together with the ministry, the National Bank of Ukraine. So we're not only covering the deficiency of the budget, we do believe that we have to be partners here with the National Bank, and we have to coordinate our joint policy in this case, and still preserving the independence of the National Bank and preserving our independence in policy building and building the demand and building the offer. We are ready to talk about that. We're ready to work with that as well. We're ready to consider that, and the next year to come, we're definitely going to be working in this direction. Thank you. Thank you, Serhiy. Thank you very much for your participation today. So going from this financial block, we're going to go to the economy block. So yes, we know that this is economy as well, but I think that we have Taras Kachka with us, the Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine and the Trade Representative of Ukraine. Taras, I have been frequently asked about the tools of the economic policies in the war, in the times of war, and this is the part of the Ministry of Economy, and this is something that got me puzzled as well, because when we do not have enough money in the budget, and when there is no big opportunity for the financial support of businesses, so what can the Ministry of Economy do except for the organizational administrative things during the martial law. But at the same time, you are the trade representative, as well. That gives you a little bit of the tactical mechanisms as well. But if we will consider the point of view of the external trade, that one that you're responsible for, and speaking about the Ministry of Economy overall, what would be the tools that the one that the ministry have used? What would be the most effective? What would be the most efficient? What would be the lessons learned that will give you the clearer understanding that? So then what would be the main priorities for your work for the next year to come? Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, the work in the Ministry of Economy, that is a constant work of understanding of what the Ministry of Economy should do and can do, understanding that, you know, overall that the supporting the businesses is actually the private sphere, and, you know, how to develop your businesses, and the initiative is on the business side as well. And this is the part of the worldview discussion. So how involved the ministry should be and what precisely we're doing on that. So I would like to agree with what you've said before, that there are some things that can only be described as coordination, or, for example, like last week we had a conference you know, of the so-called French administrating type of how you can manage to, let us say, conduct the orchestra of businesses. And we can go up to this imagined role of the ministry of how can you support the businesses. In all of the sectors, we have done a lot, but the most important thing, and we have to start with the issues of coordination, because in the coordination, we were able to show the powerful part, the good part of Ukrainian economy, because, you know, the year has been very bad for the businesses. You know, the macroeconomical indicators, they only give us the understanding of the downfall that was in Ukrainian economy, but we have to understand that the objective situation for the businesses has been better than we had expected when the invasion has started. So if we will see like what was expected from what might have happened from the 1st of March, in the position of the 1st of March, then we are ending the year quite successfully. So, you know, we managed to move out of this situation of shock of the Russian aggression in a good way. So, you know, providing this coordination or providing this understanding, administrating of the ministry was good in this situation, because, you know, everyday coordination and responding to the different needs of the businesses has given us the opportunity to use the energy of the business, you know, to take down some of the problematic issues. Like, for example, the brightest example for that would be how we worked with how our retail food chains have worked, because they needed logistics. We needed a lot of other things towards the logistics to provide the foods into our supermarkets. So this kind of the, let us say, product committee and this understanding was very important for this discussion and for this supply, because due to the chat and discussions, like basically every day 24/7, we were able to provide a very fast response to that. We were able, by the end of March, we were able to normalize the supply of the products to the supermarket, except for the front line, of course, even though we were able to respond to that already as well. We know how to provide the products even to the regions that have been under active military actions. The second challenge was the fuel supply, and I do believe that that is also a very important case, you know, the textbooks case as well from our parts, with the help of coordinations, with the support of our government, and with the support of our negotiations with the private actors, and the deregulations in the hardest moments, because you remember that we have taken down the price regulations that has been used in the pandemic times, just to provide additional initiatives and additional support for the fuels markets, because the fuel was way more important than holding back the prices at that moment. So this is something that helped us to work in the best way. So I do believe that was also the political role of the Ministry of the Economy in promoting those ideas properly. And there have been many things, not only for the Ministry of Economy, the government overall. We have multiple different ideas on that, and I wanted to say that right now, even in the trade, we're using all of the infrastructure infrastructure that is available. We're using the railroads, we're using the car infrastructures in the western borders. Everything that is happening right now in the Danube ports, in our Danube port lines, is the new Wild West. And this slightly ironic understanding, because the car movements there, because there is a lot of movement in the ports, and there's lots of movement there, but we understand that we need to get the energy of the businesses into the right direction. And I do believe that this dialogue that we have between the businesses, between the government, this is a very constructive dialogue. And I believe that it helps us to limit the risks that we have and to keep on moving forward. Speaking on the direct impact and working on that, we understand that we have the main tool here. We have 579, and we're using this program as much as possible. And we understand that the banks are responding quite good towards this program. They understand this tool. This tool has become a universal tool in a way. So because, even when you're trying to outline what would be the credits formats that can be participate in this program, then this is something that you need and more, because there is quite a high amount of the project available. Plus, on the 1st of July, we have launched a program on the direct subsidies. We have the e-job program, e-robota program, which means that we're providing the micro grants up to 250 hryvnias, and we have been providing the grants for SMEs for the joint finance. So on one hand, this will just trying to work on that. This is just the first tryout, because basically every coin that we have, every moment that we have, we're directing to those grants, especially to those micro grants. And we didn't have this wide-scale plans, and we didn't have a lot of billions of hryvnias available. And based on the discussion that we've had before, and especially with the Minister of Finance, we understand that this scale of support is not available for us. So we're operating with this couple dozens millions, and we have provided already almost more than 1 billion hryvnias in payments that we have provided, if we will speak about all of the grants that have been offered. So our goal for the next year is to increase this visible and available part for the support of the businesses. And we can speak of different things here. So we can talk about the subsidies, or we can talk about whatever is that. But basically, under the conditions of war, it is one of the most important and relevant mechanisms that will give us the opportunity to support the economical activity of the society. We're not talking about making the products cheaper. We're not talking about trying to find the decrease the competitive advantages. We need to make sure that the people in the military time would think about businesses, about building the new businesses, about developing businesses, for people not to get depressed, for people not to stop. And this is the most important thing that we're targeting our support mechanisms with. We will be using that for sure in year 2023, and we're hoping our partners will participate in that. We're inviting them to participate in the long programs or in small grant programs. I know that the EU for Business, the one had started to provide the same micro grants, and the International Organization for Migration. So there's multiple donors that have been participating in this work, and they're working and supporting us on that. And of course, we're working on providing the access to the international markets. European Union that has become super dominating trade partners for us this year, and in certain months we've had, I think that June was a record year with us. We've had almost 40% of our flow with the European Union. We know that after the Black Sea ports has been reused again, so we have increased our exports to the non-European countries, but we know that we are almost de facto integrated into the European Union market on exports and imports, especially in those critical important goods as the pharmacies or medicines or fuels, because we are buying that mostly from the market of the European Union. We have we have the customs-free regime, so we do not need to. You don't have to find what would be the quotas or what would be the trade regime for your goods because they are not available there. They have been taken down. We're working on preserving this regime because we want to support this economical activity of people. It's not about making preferences. It's not about making additional advances. It's the idea that while there is the war going on, we need to stimulate the trade and we need to stimulate people of being economically active. Overall, we had a very interesting experience this year because we've had a deal on the digital trade with the UK, and we have a corresponding works with Canada, with Emirates, and with the European Union. We have a separate program on digital integration. This is very important as well because this kind of agreements, they're directed here and now for emphasizing that collaborating with companies that are working in Ukraine, that will be interesting for the international world. So you do not have to displace all of your collective to provide the services abroad. And the final things, the thing that the Ministry of Economy has done, let us say, against the National Bank of Ukraine, because we're trying to constructively challenge the certain limitations on the assets movement in Ukraine. We understand that there has to be certain changes that have to be provided because of the martial law, but we really want to see that basically as minimum as possible risks compared. So our main task is to test out all of those limitations and take them down as much as possible. That's a constant discussion. We have a very good discussion with the National Bank of Ukraine on those things, but still our role about that is to advocate a certain liberalization for all of the measures possible, because we believe the more normal we will have our economy working, the less opinions we will have that we will need some kind of a classical military economy that needs to have the harsh planning involved. So we do hope that we have a lot of entrepreneurial initiatives in Ukraine to drive Ukrainian economy, to support Ukraine's development and to use it to Ukrainian military needs, but not for us to go to this planned economy rails, because we understand that up till the moment of our victory, we need to have a live economy so that we would go further on without any kind of additional transition periods to restore it fully. Thank you. Thank you, Taras. I'm going to have two questions for you, and one of them is directly to your competence level, and the second question is going to be more challenging and is overall about what the ministry is responsible of. So there is the direct question from a good acquaintance of mine, Modrokoshev from Interfax. He has a question on the grain initiative. And the grain initiative, and I've lost the question. Yes, I found it again. So whether Ukraine is interested in creating the transit route to the Baltic countries together with the UN, and how do you evaluate this opportunity to create this corridor? So do you support that? Well, yes, it's not a simple question actually, because like when we're asking this question today, when we see that Putin has been to Minsk, and that actually means that objective chances for using Belarus as transit countries, we don't have that. And of course, we've had this idea as the hypothetical idea that has been processed at some point of time, but we do understand that now, under the current circumstances, it's impossible based on the security risks that are connected to that. So we have to understand that, based on all of the discussions, the logistics discussions, we have to understand that we have these two big whales on that. The first thing that we have to have the full deblocking of the Black Sea ports and Mykolaiv, first of all, because Mykolaiv is the huge part of the exports, and the development of the infrastructure of the western borders So basically the river and the sea and the car transportation, that is something that we see all the time. So we see that there is a business interest to that for the development of the infrastructures in the western border. It is there, and we see that the international financial institutions with the EBRD, for example, they're ready to financially support these projects for both sides of the border, because we're interested in doing that not only in Ukraine, but we're interested to do that in Polish, Romanian, Hungarian side. We want to engage the investments from all of the sides of that. The most effective story for us would be to have no limitations on the transport overall, the freedom of navigation, the freedom of transport. This is something that we are looking for, and this is something that we are looking for and aiming for in our front lines as well today. But we need to have the security guarantees for the very specific routes. And, having this negotiation is a nonsensical situation. This is a bright example of how the war gets into the trade. So today we've had that the General Council of the World Trade Organization and Russia representatives have said, let us not politicize trade. How can you not do that when the military aggression is impacting the freedom of transit and freedom of navigation? All of the things that are considered to be very trivial in the trade policies right now. So of course we really would like to have all of the available free trade as much as possible, but it's clearly that we have the freedom of trade with very specific limitations on infrastructures in the western borders. We had negotiations that have been working, the Black Sea Grain Initiative. We don't have the freedom of navigation in other goods than the grains in the Black Sea ports, and it's quite clear that the transit from Belarus cannot be taken seriously due to the situation of this connected with the security. Okay, thank you. And Taras, we will finalize it with the questions that Anna has shown us. I do believe that's a very interesting slides that we have seen on the structures of Ukrainians and human capital, of where Ukrainians are, which part of Ukrainians is displaced people, what are the displaced persons, who are the refugees, considering what you have said about the role of the Ministry of Economy. So what would be your vision? What would be the vision for the ministries of economy in these conditions of the traditional low mobility of Ukrainians as labor capital, as human capital, when people have been working for decades in the very same enterprises for many, many years, and now these tectonic changes have started when millions of people were forced to move inside of the territory of Ukraine, and there is the possibility that they might go to different countries to look for jobs. How can we combine it with the private initiatives on creating safer jobs in the regions, in the occupied regions of Ukraine, or safer regions of Ukraine? What is the strategy for the ministry not to lose the human capital on one hand, and on the other hand not to lose some kind of entrepreneurial ideas that might need some resources and people to work? What do you think on this problem? Well, first of all, let us say that this problem, understanding, the academic idea of it, just like as posing the tasks. So this is something that is important for the government from the very first moment of work. So, it's not kind of a thing that we never know before. It's not a new thing. So it is a constant subject for our discussions as well. What would be the goal of government? The government goal would be so that the people who are especially the internally displaced persons, for the people to be economically active, or for the people to be able to either work or to be entrepreneurs, so that they will be able to live in the new place, so they would see the perspective that they can go back to where they lived before. That is something that is connected to the work of the social infrastructure or the restoration and recovery for sure. And it's quite clear for all of the programs on the early recovery and, for example, the normalization of the logistics for the deoccupied territories are important, or recoveries and restorings of the schools and the other social infrastructure is important, so that the people who would like to come back were able to come back as soon as possible. So that is mostly on behalf of the recovery Vice Prime Minister. Our main target is creating creating new jobs and finding the new opportunities for jobs. That is why our direct support program is called e-job. So basically giving the people additional opportunities for employment. The same, the Recovery Army project. So those are the classic civic works, the tools that have been used in all of the war-torn and post-war societies in the 20th centuries at very least. And on the international investment and international trade, this is something that is very interesting that has been outlined by Christina Freeland. She has made a presentation in the US on the politicization of trade, the so-called friendshoring, when you are taking your industrial production to the countries that are friendly for you, like Ireland. So like this is the, we do believe that, you know, the people who are the internally displaced persons right now in Ukraine and looking for the economical motivations, we believe that those people are a very good leverage, for example, for some of the production lines like Fujikura or Lyon that has been located in the west of Ukraine, that they can be actually very good and attractive regions right now there as well. So that is why we're using these patents, and we're understanding that the situation is really complex right now and is really hard. It's a military challenge situation, and you know, every single examples are a very good way for us to be optimistic, but it's hard for us to show it statistic-wise yet. And we also have the relocation program, that is the story that helps people that have been under the risks of shelling to preserve their own job and moving, relocating together with their enterprise. It's a magnificent project, and we already had more than 700 enterprises participating in this. For me, that is a very good result, and it's a very good indicator that our producers, our production lines, they can be effective by relocating their equipment, by relocating their employees, and finding the new place for conducting their businesses successfully. Thank you. Thank you, Taras. When I was listening to you, when I was listening to Andrii for Serhiy, I do believe that we're really lucky with the key departments and the key ministries that are responsible for the economy policy of Ukraine. You know, the Ministry of Economy that supports the principles of economical freedoms, but coordinates the projects when they're not trying to intervene in the market, but trying to overcome the abnormal situation that is now being seen in the economy and to maximize the opportunities of the economy. That's very good. And the National Bank of Ukraine that is currently protecting the resilience of Ukrainian banking systems and Ukrainian national currency. The Ministry of Finance that on one hand has a clearer understanding of holding the national currency and understands the responsibility for preserving the economical freedom and economical stability, but at the same time using all of the additional resources to cover all of our main duties and all of our main debts, and finding ways to stimulate the economy and searching for the support, the international support, building the national high-quality economical policy. That's something that I wanted to outline. So I wanted just to say that the people who have been following Ukrainian economy, you might know that Ukrainian economy was not always that lucky with the leaders of the key economical centers of the government and the country. So I'm really grateful to Taras, Andrii, and Serhiy that were able to participate in our discussion today and in our event today. I'm really grateful to the team of the Center of Economical Strategy that were working on this annual review and annual outlook, and have made the monthly outlook throughout this year, and we will continue to do that together with the colleagues of from the German economics team. Maybe we will work in slightly different format, but we will definitely continue with our monthly analysis in the next year as well. We do hope that, you know, Robert, even though it's a pleasure for us to be working with you as well, but we do hope that this project will end as soon as possible, because we've designed and created this project specifically during the war, and we hope that the war will end with Ukrainian victory and we will be able to stop this project, because there will be no need for this project no more, because our work will be normalized again and we will be analyzing the economical policies of the peaceful time. But we will keep on doing this as long as it will be needed. Thank you very much for being with us, and I know that there's a lot of people who have been with us throughout all of the year of our events. Thank you very much for everyone joining us today, specifically for this event. Thank you very much for supporting us by your participation as well. Today, once again, wanted to say that we're going to be publishing the Ukrainian note later on. Tomorrow, we're going to be publishing the English version of it. We will have it provided to all of you for if you have been registered for our events, and you will be able to read it out for sure. If you were not able to join us till the end, or were not able to be with us from the very beginning, then the links for all of the meetings and the interesting discussions will be available. Thank you very much, and I wish you a quiet